Her snarky comments echoed through the store, drawing laughs and whispers, as if his red MAGA hat was a bullseye inviting ridicule. The cashier thought she had an easy target, completely unaware that the man standing before her wasn't just another shopper, but someone with the power to change her life with a single phone call. Phones were already out, recording the scene, capturing what looked like his public humiliation. But everything shifted the moment he calmly said, "Call your manager." What happened next left the entire store stunned, and her world turned upside down. John stepped into the supermarket with a relaxed stride. It was a typical Thursday evening, and he was just another customer blending into the crowd, or so he hoped. His signature red MAGA hat sat proudly on his head, a casual statement of his beliefs. He wasn't trying to make a scene. He was here for bread, milk, and maybe a bag of pretzels for the game later. Yet, as always, the hat drew attention. Near the produce section, two women whispered behind a stack of apples, sneaking glances at him like he was a zoo exhibit. A man stalking oranges glanced up, rolled his eyes, and muttered something under his breath. John didn't flinch. After years of public service, he had learned to wear criticism like a badge of honor, or in this case, a hat. By the time he reached the register, the lines had thickened, and the buzz of checkout beeps filled the air. He found himself at lane 6, manned by a young woman with neon green hair, pulled into two messy buns, and a cascade of bracelets jingling on her wrists. Her name tag read, "Susie, happy to help," though the sarcasm dripping from her expression suggested otherwise. Susie glanced up, her eyes locking on his hat like a bull spotting a red flag. Her lips curled into a smirk as she greeted him with exaggerated cheer. Well, look what we have here," she said, grabbing his gallon of milk. "Celebrating Patriot Day, are we?" John smiled politely, sensing the tension brewing. "Just grabbing some milk? Thanks." She held the milk in her hand for a moment, as if inspecting it for defects, then pretended to fumble it. The gallon tumbled to the floor, hitting with a dull thud. A small puddle of white liquid seeped out from the corner of the jug. "Oh no," Susie gasped with mock horror. "Guess it just slipped. Kinda like democracy these days, huh?" From the next register, another cashier stifled a laugh, and a teenager in line behind John whispered, "This is gonna be good," while discreetly pulling out his phone to record. John bent down to pick up the jug, handing it back to her with the calm demeanor of a man who'd seen worse. "It happens. Maybe try holding it tighter next time," he said, his voice steady. But Susie wasn't done. She scanned the milk again, this time deliberately slow, dragging out the beep. "You know, it's funny," she said, loud enough for the entire line to hear. "Some people wear hats like that and think they're fixing the country. Meanwhile, they're just buying expired milk." She turned the jug over theatrically, squinting at the date as if she'd found a hidden clue. "Oh, wait, this one's fine. Guess you got lucky." A few chuckles rippled through the line. John raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. His patience wasn't infinite, but he wasn't about to give her the reaction she was fishing for. Susie scanned the rest of his items with exaggerated flair, tossing his loaf of bread onto the counter so hard that the bag split. "Oops, looks like that one's gonna need some making great again," she quipped, winking at the customer in the next line, who snorted into their soda bottle. John glanced at the bread, then back at Susie. "Do you always treat customers this well, or am I just special?" he asked, his tone sharp but calm. Susie leaned in, her smirk widening. "Only the special ones," she said, emphasizing the word as though it carried layers of meaning. Behind them, a woman in yoga pants muttered, "Unreal," while a man in a baseball cap shook his head and walked to another line. The teen with the phone grinned, clearly enjoying the show. John chuckled softly to himself, his expression unreadable. This is only the beginning, he thought, as Susie grabbed the next item, a carton of eggs, and gave him a pointed look. The tension was thick, the line was restless, and Susie was just warming up. Susie picked up the loaf of bread with the flair of a game show host, revealing a grand prize. She glanced at it and smirked. "Well, of course, white bread. Fitting." She placed it on the counter with a dramatic thud. clearly trying to provoke John. John, still calm, gave her a small smile. Nothing wrong with the classic. But Susie wasn't done. Next came the tea. She held up the box like she'd just found an ancient artifact. Herbal tea, let me guess. For stress? Or maybe you're trying to open your mind to new ideas. She leaned in conspiratorially, lowering her voice. Don't worry though. Critical thinking is optional. The guy behind John groaned audibly. Can you hurry it up? Some of us have lives to get back to. Susie shot him a look as sharp as her neon eyeliner. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't realize we had a line full of MAGA voters here. Guess we'll just have to wait for democracy to make itself great again. She laughed at her own joke, though no one else joined in. John, still unbothered, finally spoke up. You've got a great sense of humor. Maybe channel that energy into doing your job? Her smile froze for a second, before turning into a defiant grin. Oh, I'm doing my job just fine. In fact, I think I'll decide who gets my excellent service today. This is a free country, right? She grabbed 2 of his items and slid them to the side of the counter, deliberately ignoring them. These? Not feeling like scanning these. Maybe next time. The tension in the line hit a boiling point. 2 people back in line, a woman with a toddler in her arms, muttered loudly, Is this for real? Who acts like this? Another man, dressed in a work uniform, pulled out his phone and began recording. This is ridiculous. Hey, where's the manager? Somebody needs to deal with this. Susie, now fully committed to her performance, threw her hands up theatrically. Manager! Oh, that's me. I'm the manager of this line, and I say no service for hat enthusiasts. The crowd behind John erupted. This is insane! Shouted a woman in yoga pants. Is this how you treat people here? Barked the man with the phone. Susie waved them off with exaggerated nonchalance. Oh, relax. Everyone's so sensitive these days. Can't a girl have a little fun at work? John, unshaken, met her gaze with a calm resolve. You're really leaning into this, aren't you? He asked, his tone almost amused. Susie crossed her arms, standing her ground. You bet I am. Someone's got to stand up to you people. At this point, a middle-aged woman in the next line leaned over to John. Sir, there's an open register 2 lanes over. You don't have to take this. But John shook his head, still smiling faintly. No, thank you. I'd like to see this through. The man with the phone took a step forward, aiming his camera directly at Susie. This is going online. You're gonna regret this, lady. Susie turned to him, her bravado unwavering. Go ahead. I'm not scared of a bunch of keyboard warriors. She turned back to John and added with a smirk, Maybe your followers can make this viral. John tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Well, he said evenly, they do have a way of getting the word out. The murmurs in the line grew louder, and the atmosphere became electric with anticipation. People were filming, whispering, and speculating about how this would end. Susie, oblivious to the storm brewing around her, picked up John's next item and prepared to deliver another jab. But John? He just stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting. The stage was set, the crowd was watching, and the game Susie thought she was winning was about to turn on its head. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, like the low rumble before a thunderstorm. Phones were out, cameras rolling, and Susie basked in the attention like she was headlining a comedy show. She turned to the next item in John's cart, a box of cereal, and held it up. Cereal? Let me guess. No sugar, no fun, just like those rallies you love so much? She grinned, pleased with herself, as the tension in the line reached a breaking point. Before John could reply, a tall man in a pressed shirt and tie stormed over, his name tag glinting under the fluorescent lights. Greg, store manager. His face was a mix of irritation and confusion. What's going on here, Susie? Why is lane 6 backed up all the way to the freezer aisle? Susie, confident as ever, pointed at John without missing a beat. This guy's the problem. Look at him, waltzing in here with that ridiculous hat, stirring up trouble. I'm just trying to keep the store a safe space, you know? Greg's eyes shifted to John, and his entire demeanor changed in an instant. His stern expression melted into something closer to panic. "Wait, Mr. Mayor?" Greg stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The crowd collectively gasped. A few people exchanged shocked looks, and someone muttered, "Wait, that's the mayor?" John, ever composed, gave Greg a polite nod. "Good to see you, Greg, though I can't say the feeling's mutual at the moment." Greg turned to Susie, his face pale. "Susie, do you have any idea who you've been harassing?" Susie blinked, the smirk on her face faltering for the first time. "What? No way. He's not the mayor. If he's so important, why is he buying his own groceries?" She turned back to John, her grin returning. "Yeah, right. If you're the mayor, I'm the Queen of England." John didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled his phone from his pocket and made a quick call, his voice calm but firm. "Yes, this is Mayor John. Could you send a team to Pineview Market? Bring the press kit. Thanks." He hung up and turned back to Susie, his smile faint but loaded with meaning. "You were saying?" The crowd erupted into whispers. People leaned closer, their curiosity now piqued. The man with the phone was whispering to his friend, "Oh, this is going viral for sure." 5 minutes later, the sound of tires screeching outside drew everyone's attention. A black SUV with the city council's logo pulled up, followed by a car with a city crest. 2 officials in sharp suits stepped out, holding clipboards and a camera. They walked into the store with purpose, ignoring the gawking customers. One of them approached John, giving him a respectful nod. "Mr. Mayor, we're here as requested. Is this regarding the community relations audit?" John smiled faintly. "Something like that." He gestured toward the counter, where Susie stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. "Please document my purchases and interactions here." The officials immediately began snapping pictures of the counter, the damaged loaf of bread, the leaking milk jug, and most importantly, Susie's stunned face. Greg looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Mr. Mayor, I'm so sorry. This is a complete misunderstanding. Susie's behavior doesn't reflect our store's values." John tilted his head, his voice calm but cutting. "Doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it seems your staff feels pretty comfortable making judgments about customers." Susie, finally regaining her voice, blurted out, "I didn't know. He wasn't wearing a name tag or anything. How was I supposed to know he was the mayor?" John turned to her, his expression unreadable. "So, if I weren't the mayor, this behavior would be acceptable?" Her face turned beet red, and she stammered, "No, I was just joking." One of the officials cleared his throat and addressed Greg. "As per city regulations, discrimination against customers is grounds for an immediate review of your business license." Greg's eyes widened in panic. "Please, Mr. Mayor, we'll fix this. Susie will be dealt with. I promise." The crowd was eating it up. Someone in the back clapped, and soon others joined in, cheering for John. The guy with the phone grinned and said loudly, "That's what you get for being a jerk." John raised his hand, silencing the noise. "Greg, I'm not here to ruin anyone's day, but I do expect better from businesses in my city. If this is how your team operates, you've got some serious changes to make." Greg nodded furiously. "Absolutely. Changes will be made immediately." John looked at Susie one last time, his voice soft but firm. "Next time, try a little kindness. It goes a long way." The officials wrapped up their documentation, and John handed over his card to pay for his groceries. As he walked out, someone in the crowd shouted, "Mayor John for president!" The crowd erupted in laughter and applause as John exited the store, leaving Susie to deal with the fallout and her newfound internet fame. The air around the checkout lane was thick with tension. The laughter and smirks that had accompanied Susie's earlier jabs were gone, replaced by stunned silence. Everyone was processing what had just unfolded. Susie, now pale and visibly sweating, threw up her hands in a desperate attempt to defend herself. "I didn't know he was the mayor," she cried, her voice tinged with panic. "How could I have known? Look at that hat. He brought this on himself." Greg, the manager, turned to her with a look that could cut glass. His voice, low and controlled, was sharper than any shout. "Susie, we don't treat any customer like that, hat or no hat. The fact that he's the mayor just makes this worse. Go to my office, now. We'll discuss your future here." Susie opened her mouth to argue, but Greg cut her off with a raised hand. "No more excuses." As Susie reluctantly began to walk away, she couldn't resist one last attempt to save face. "But he's just a customer," she muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Why does it even matter?" John, who had been quietly observing the drama, finally broke his silence. He turned to her with a calm but piercing smile. "Because, Susie, the customer is always right. Isn't that what they teach you in training?" His eyes gleamed with quiet humor as he added, "Especially when the customer happens to be your mayor." The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, erupted into laughter and applause. A man in a baseball cap whistled, and someone shouted, "That's how it's done!" Greg turned back to John, his hands wringing nervously. "Mr. Mayor, please accept our sincerest apologies for this incident. We'll, of course, provide these groceries free of charge." He gestured to the now infamous pile of items on the counter, but John shook his head, pulling out his wallet. "That won't be necessary, Greg. I'm not here for freebies. Just make sure your staff remembers why they're here, and who they're here to serve." Greg nodded furiously, mumbling assurances as John swiped his card. As John picked up his bags, someone in the crowd shouted, "Mayor John, we're voting for you again!" This was met with a round of applause and cheers. John paused at the door, turning back to the crowd with a wry smile. "I appreciate the support, but let's remember, the real vote happens every day, with how we treat each other. Have a good evening, everyone." The cheers grew louder as John exited the store, the sound of his quiet triumph following him all the way to his car. By the next morning, the incident was the talk of the town and the internet. Multiple videos captured from different angles were trending across social media platforms, each with captions like, "MAGA Mayor handles Karen Cashier with grace," and "Customer service gone wrong, Mayor edition." The clips showed John's calm demeanor, juxtaposed with Susie's over-the-top behavior. Memes popped up, featuring phrases like, "This milk didn't expire, but Susie's career just did." Local news stations picked up the story, and John was invited for an interview. Sitting comfortably in front of the camera, still wearing his now iconic MAGA hat, he spoke with the same calm authority that had won him the crowd at the store. "We're all entitled to our opinions," he said. "That's what makes America great. But respect isn't optional. It's essential. Even when we disagree, we owe each other that much. And honestly, a little kindness never hurt anyone." The clip of his interview went viral, drawing praise from both sides of the political aisle. As for Susie, her face became a meme overnight. While some commenters tried to defend her, the overwhelming consensus was that her behavior was unprofessional at best and outright rude at worst. Greg released a public statement apologizing to John and the community, promising immediate customer service retraining for all staff. It was later confirmed that Susie's employment had been terminated. Meanwhile, John continued his duties as mayor with his usual quiet confidence. The incident didn't change him. It only reaffirmed his belief in the importance of leading by example. At the next city council meeting, a citizen stepped up to the microphone during public comments. "Mayor John," she said with a smile, "I just want to thank you. You didn't just handle that situation with class. You reminded us all how we should treat each other. You've got my vote for as long as you keep wearing that hat." The room broke into applause, and John, tipping his MAGA hat with a humble grin, replied, "Well, I guess I'll need to buy a few more of these."